Hi, we are once again working on a lab. In this case, this is lab 262. And so pretty much this is going to deal with static and dynamic IP addresses. Um, the main idea of this lab is that we have a customer who calls technical support and they're complaining that they're having a problem with the IP address assigned to that EC2 instance. In this case, it's referring to the to a public IP address that keeps changing anytime that they stop, and then start the instance. So, as part of the cloud technical support, we need to figure out what the problem is and try to solve the problem for the user. So let me begin by clicking the Start Lab button. Okay, the lab is being provisioned. There is a service called CloudFormation. That service is the one that is working in the background, creating the resources that you're going to need in this lab. Um, I'm just mentioning this simply because this is a service that we will need to learn in the future. At this point, you don't need to know about it, but for some people who are wondering who creates the resources, the EC2 instances in the background for labs, this is done automatically by AWS, and there is something called a service called CloudFormation. That service, you just give it a document called the template. You pass the template through CloudFormation, and it will create the resources specified in the CloudFormation template. Okay, so the status of the lab is now ready, so we're going to close this and let's take a look at the lab. Well, I need to launch the management console, so I'm going to click on this. If you ever see this message saying the credentials in your login link were invalid, contact your administrator. There's no administrator who's going to help you with this. You need to solve it yourself. In this case, what you need to do is the console seems to think that you're still logged in. So what you need to do is log out for good. And once you do that, you can go back to the instructions, click on the AWS button, and wait for the console to show up. So here we have it. Let me make some room for the console. And let's see. Okay, there we are. So internet protocols, static and dynamic IP addresses. Your role is a cloud support engineer at Amazon Web Services. During your shift, a customer from a Fortune 500 company requests assistance regarding a networking issue within their AWS infrastructure. The email and an attachment of the architecture is shown below. So here is the diagram of the resources that they have and how they have everything deployed. So let's take a look at the ticket itself. Hello Cloud, we are having issues with one of our EC2 instances. The IP address changes every time we start and stop this instance called public instance. Um, this causes everything to break since it needs a static IP address. We are not sure why the IP address changes on this instance to a random IP every time. Can you please investigate? Attached is our architecture. Please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so just based on theory alone, if you remember, if you launch an EC2 instance that has a public IP address, AWS assigns what we call a dynamic public IP address, and that public IP address is going to change anytime you stop and later start the EC2 instance. So it's something that we have seen in class already, but we're going to get to that conclusion as you will see. So the objectives of this lab are going to be to summarize the customer scenario, to analyze the difference between a statically and a dynamically assigned IP address using EC2 instances, assign a persistent or a static public IP address to an EC2 instance. I know that it doesn't say public, but we know that it's public um, because those are the IP addresses that we can use to remotely access the EC2 instance. Um, Develop a solution for the customer's issue found in this lab. After developing a solution, summarize and describe your findings. And we have 60 minutes to do this, and there are some restrictions. You know, there are certain services that we cannot create, like for instance, very quickly, you see that there is some service here that we don't have access to. Whenever you see a red box like this, that means some problem most likely with permissions. Okay, so we know that, um, yeah, I started the lab. The lab is already started. I click on the AWS button. That's fine. Next, we're going to investigate the customer environment. Recall that you've learned what you learned about static and dynamic IP addresses. Which type of IP address do you think Bob assigned his EC2 instance if it constantly changes when it is stopped and started again? Once again, based on theory alone, dyna dynamic public IP addresses will change whenever you stop and start an EC2 instance. You will test this theory by launching one EC2 instance in the AWS Lab environment. You will start with how the customer has his configuration and troubleshoot the issue from there. So pretty much the customer sent us the diagram. We're going to try to reproduce this so that we can figure out what the customer problem is. That is a common thing that you will have to do in cases like this. For task 2, you will understand the customer environment and replicate the issue. In this scenario, Bob is a customer requesting assistance, is having issues with his EC2 instance, constantly changing IP addresses every time he stops and starts his instance. He cannot leave his instance on because it's very expensive for him to do so. And he requires the IP address to be set to a static IP address, or else it breaks the other resources attached to it. So we're going to go to the in to the to we're in the AWS Management Console already. We are going to go to the EC2 service. Again, you can access it through here, which is the most lengthy way to do it. I would click compute. In compute, I will see EC2 instance, this one, and then I will be able to launch that service. But the easiest way to deal with this is simply to type in the name of the service. And something important that you can also do is, if you want the management console to remember some of the most used services in your management console, you can click this and then it's going to be a favorite. Okay, so as you can see now, I have the EC2 instance here because it's a favorite that I specified for my management console. Okay, so let's continue with this. So that was part of the compute, as I mentioned. In the next step, now you're in the dashboard. Well, I need to go to the EC2 dashboard. In order to go to the EC2 dashboard, I click on the shortcut. And then we need to go to instances, which is this one. And we see that there's a virtual machine here, an EC2 instance. The label of it is command host. Okay, but now let's see what we need to do. So we can see that there is one, yeah, there is one EC2 instance. Let's see what is it that they need us to do. Now in this step number 8, from the top right corner, select launch instances. This is, let me see, from the top right corner. Well, this must be part of the fact that AWS keeps changing um, the interface often. So, but this is where I can launch my EC2 instance. So I click launch instances, and well, it's not telling me about the label that I want to use for this server. Let me see. What is the label? The tag. The tag is going to be, I know it's kind of like all over the place, but that's what I'm doing. I'm going in the order in which the prompts are guiding me. So it's going to be test instance. That's the name of the tag that I'm associating to this instance. Um, Next, by the way, you can associate also more tags to an EC2 instance. In this case, I just for the name tag, I'm associating the value of test instance, but I could add some other um, labels if I wanted. And next, we need to select the AMI. It's telling us to select the Amazon Linux 2 HVM. So as you can see, the problem that we have here is the default one that we're being offered as part of the free tier is the Amazon Linux 2023. Um, and it seems that we don't have Linux 2 anymore, so you go for the Linux 2023. Uh, the architecture, we leave it as is. We don't need to be concerned with that. Let's see. So we have taken care of the AMI, which is the template for that contains the operating system. The next one we need to choose is the instance type. And it says that we need to choose a T3 micro, which is the one that's giving us by default. And this is also part of the free tier. If whenever you are using the free tier, that lasts 12 months free use of certain services. Okay, the next I need to go to configure the instance details. Well, you can see here that it's the order of things is not quite the way that we would like it, but so let's see. I don't see configure instance details, but we will figure out the order in which things, in the way in which we need to select stuff. The next thing that it's asking me for is the key pair. If I look for the key pair, let's see at what point I mentioned the key pair. This is the part about the key pair. It's telling me to use the Voki key pair. So, and it's provided to me already. So this was already created by AWS. So you select the Voki. Next question that we're asked is the network settings. Let's see, is there anywhere that they tell us about the network settings? And if you look at step 3, that's the one that talks about um, the networking uh, information. It's telling us to select the lab VPC. There's a VPC that is already created for us, and that VPC is the one that we need to select. It has the label of um, lab VPC. Um, you see that we have this, it's by default it's trying to it's trying to have us use a specific VPC, but we don't want to use the default one in this case. This is that AWS gives to you just because, uh, but we need to use a very specific one. This one was also created by the CloudFormation template, by the way, the same as the virtual machine that we saw there. And then I need to select within, now that I have selected this VPC, so think about it like this. Now that you have selected the already predefined VPC, we are now going to select a subnet inside of it. It's most likely going to be a public subnet. So let's continue. Let's see, we're here. So that's the VPC. Now remember the container for the containers. The where we place our EC2 instance is inside of a subnet. This is the This is that subnet. This is the label, public subnet. This is this number here that looks very weird with some random numbers and letters. This is the way that AWS keeps track of everything. AWS doesn't keep track of your resources by name. It keeps track of your resources by some unique ID. This is just for us humans to be able to use this, to be able to label things in a way that we can remember. And then the next thing that we need to do is, well, there is a setting here that's very important, and is the auto assign public IP address. If this setting is set to enable, any EC2 instance that you launch inside of this public subnet will get a public IP address. So in this case, we're going to leave this default as is because we want the EC2 instance that we're going to be launching to have a public IP address. And also we're putting it inside a public subnet. Next step is, well, it's a little bit messy on this side. So next thing is asking you for the firewall. That is the security group. Um, let's see where they mention the firewall. Yeah, I know it's kind of a little bit messy with all of these things. Okay, so the security group, it doesn't say, let me see, does it say anything about the security group? A storage tags key. Okay, yes, configure security group. Yeah, this is the next step. Assign a security group, select an existing security group. Okay, so I'm going to select a predefined or pre-created security group that was created for us. So this is the one that this is the one that we should use. Because yeah, it has Linux instance. That's that. Next thing that we need to do is we need to, let's see, advanced network configuration. I don't think that we're going to use any advanced network configuration. So the next step will be to add storage. The storage that we need to add here is going to be, it said that we should leave it as a default, which is 8 gigabytes of GPT-3. So this is kind of like the hard drive that this machine is going to use. And then let's see what else. Assign a security group, which I have done, and then review and launch the instance. So I need to launch this instance, and we're just going to have to wait some time before this instance is created. As I mentioned to you before, what we need to do now is just wait. There's going to be 3 checks that need to pass before we can access that EC2 instance. Okay. In here it says that there is 2 out of 2, but in reality a new check has been added, and that's why we have to wait for the 3 checks to pass. So we just are going to have to wait for that while that happens. Something to keep in mind also, I think I mentioned it to you before, but something to do from, like if you have waited say like 4 minutes and you don't see that this change, click on this refresh button because maybe those checks have already passed. It happens sometimes. In this particular case, that wasn't the case. Um, but we're going to wait until we get to the 3 checks. Okay, so as we can see, the three checks have passed, which means we're ready to continue with the next step. And next, what we have here is select the checkbox of your test instance. That checkbox is going to be found to the left of the instance. So I select this one. And it says that I need to go to the networking tab, which is here. And then I need to note the public and the private IP address. Okay. Let me get this here. I'm going to get that information from that EC2 instance. And so, and this is the test instance. And the private address is going to be Remember, all EC2 instance will always have a private address, always. Uh, but the public one is optional. But if you remember, in the settings of the subnet where I placed this EC2 instance, we had an like a like a toggle option there, and it was set to enable to for the any EC2 instance that is placed inside of that subnet to get a public IP address. So now I go here and paste the public IP address. Next, the thing that we need to do next is we are going to see what happens when it says that I should restart the EC2 instance. So the first test that I'm doing is restarting EC2 instance. Let's see what happens when we restart the EC2 instance. Pretty much what happens is we're interested to see what happens with the public and private IP addresses. And oh, let me see. Now restart the instance. Okay, so I need to restart that instance. Let me move this over. I don't need this line here. Okay. Actually, let me see. Well, this is the lab number. I probably don't need this IP addresses information here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the test instance, and then I'm going to in the instance state I'm going to say reboot, and we're going to see whether rebooting changes the any of the IP addresses. Okay, so we're going to do a reboot. And also something important to remember is that reboots are usually they take place very quickly. Um, so let's see what it says. Uh, Let me see. So rebooting again happens very quickly. So I'm not sure if we're going to. I don't think that yeah, we didn't see changing state, but the reboot took place very quickly, and that machine is pretty much ready. Now let's take a look at the IP addresses. Have they changed? If you see the IP address that we have for the private IP address, it's 10.0.10.72. That's the same one. Now let's take a look at the IP address, the public IP address. 54, I'm comparing it against this one here. So it's 54.202.64.191. What this means is whenever you reboot an EC2 instance, the dynamic public IP address does not change. It will only change, as we're going to find out, whenever we stop and later restart the EC2 instance. Okay, so we have noted that they remain the same. And now, so let's see, now let's stop the EC2 instance. Now let me do the stop and start. So in this case, I'm going to go to instance state. I'm going to say stop the TS instance, which is selected right now, and stop. And it's going to go through certain stages. It's going into the stopping. It says that it has successfully initiated the stopping of the instance, but it doesn't mean that it has completed the stopping of the instance. Again, with this, every now and then, if you have waited like 2 or 3 minutes and it doesn't say stopped, you can refresh just to see maybe the state has changed, and it will be stopped. While I wait for this, Something important to remember, because I have mentioned it before, is that whenever you have a stopped EC2 instance, you don't pay for the for the virtual CPUs, and you don't pay for the amount of RAM that you selected for the EC2 instance. Those two, the virtual CPUs and the RAM, they have been freed up. The thing that was not freed up is the hard drive that we attach to that machine. Okay, so let's do it again. Okay, so now it says that it's stopped. Uh, so as you can see, when I go to networking, you can see that the public IP address is kind of like undefined. But look at the private IP address. Even when it is stopped, this IP address is going to be reserved for that EC2 instance. But that's for the private IP address. That's to be used locally inside of that VPC. So now let's proceed to change the state of this EC2 instance so that we can start it and then see what difference we have. Once again, we need to go through the through the three states. Oh, well, it seems that that one is already, let me see. Oh, this is already up and running. Okay, so now we need to compare this public IP address, compare it with this one. And we can see that they're not the same. This is 18, 237, 253. The one in that note that I have, and that sticky, it says 54.202, 64.191. So the IP address, the public IP address changed. Okay, and that's something to that happens here. And we haven't solved the problem yet for this customer. And the problem is that the public IP address keeps changing. The private one does not change. As you can see, it's still the same, 10.0.10.72. So now what we are going to have to do is we are going to have to attach to where we will have to create a elastic IP address. So I need to expand this menu again, and it says that we can find elastic IP addresses under the network and security section, and this is the network and security section, and we have elastic IP. So what we're going to do is we're going to select elastic IP, and the next step that I need to do is I need to, oh, let me see. Notice that there are no elastic IPs. Well, it says that there are no elastic IPs, but there is one here. I don't know who created that, but it seems that we have one. Let me see. From the dashboard, from the EC2 dashboard, navigate to the network and security on the left navigation and select elastic IPs. Notice that there are no elastic IPs, but there is one already here. That's what's confusing me a little bit. And then so let's see. Notice that there are no. Create one by selecting. Okay, so I'm going to create an extra one. Um, so this is not the same as the one that we had before, by the way. We won't be able to recover that one. There's no way we can do that. So I'm going to allocate an elastic IP. I'm going to assume that they don't want us to use this existing one. So I will allocate a new one. From the pool of IP version 4s, that's where we want to use the, we want to create, so those, any easy to any IP addresses that you use, any IP IP addresses version 4 that you use in AWS, all of those belong to Amazon. They have been set aside um, to be used by Amazon. So we're going to use from that pool from AWS. And in this case, this lab is being done in the Oregon region, which is also referred to as US West 2. So I'm just going to select allocate IP address, So now what is going to happen is that I'm going to have a new IP address that's going to be created. It says that it has been allocated successfully. The IP address is 44.238.20.238, and that's the IP address here. I guess one question that I have for you is why do you think what happened to the previous IP address that I had? There was an IP address here, if you remember. That IP address is gone. What happens is we are there's a filter applied to the results that we see here. If we remove the filter, we will see the other IP address. So this IP address is 44.238.20.238. So let me remove the filter, and now you can see the second IP address. Um, so the one that we're going to attach to, so we can see, let me see. So what we need to do now is we need to select the elastic IP address by selecting the checkbox here. Let me see here. And then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to associate. So this IP address right now is just floating in AWS in the US West 2. It's just floating there. It's not associated with anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Actions, and I'm going to associate this elastic IP address. I'm going to associate to an EC2 instance. And in this case, it's going to be the test EC2 instance. That's what I'm going to associate with. And so what is going to happen now is, so I'm going to select associate. And now let's go to the EC2 instances. And then now let's take a look at what is the IP address. Oh, let me see. Uh, Let me see. It was the this is not the IP. Let me refresh this. Let me see if something has happened here. Um, Let me see. There is something here. Let's see. What are our elastic IP address? Unless I made a mistake. Let me see. So let me go to this menu. Let me go to elastic IPs. This is the one that I associated to that instance. Let me see what happened. Uh, View details. Um, Network interface. Let's see. Let me take a look at the instances. But it was 44.238.20. I'm trying to figure out what is going on here. Okay, there it is. It seems that for whatever reason it hadn't refreshed this. That's why we were not able to see the value of the elastic IP address. But this is the right one: 44.238.20.238. That is the elastic IP address that I provisioned for this machine. So now let's see we solve the customer problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to instance state. I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to select stop. So let's wait until it says that it's in the stopped state, and then we'll see what the behavior of it is. Still stopping. Uh, Stopping. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at this, and we can see that now it's in a stop state. And as you can see, I need to see more information about the other IP address, so I'm going to collapse this to the left. So you can see that now, even though this machine is stopped, this IP address is going to be associated to that machine, even when I stop it. And The private IP address continues to be the same as it was from the beginning. We never have to worry about the private IP address changing or anything like that. But the one that we are concerned about changing is the public IP address. And the solution to this is by using an elastic IP. And let's see what is the next thing. Drop down menu, private associated is selected. Okay, so I have associated that. This is what I did earlier. I associated to an instance instead to a network card, so to speak. And now, yeah, I have done the test. So task 2, send the response to the customers, group activity. Within your group, submit your findings. Person 1 will act as Bob, the customers, while person 2 will act as the cloud support engineer. Person 2 will talk over their findings to person 1. Um, so that's pretty much, this is the end of the lab pretty much. You don't need to delete any resources. Um, but something that I forgot in the previous lab that I did, I forgot to tell you that you need to submit the lab once you're done. So in this case, we have completed that, so I can hit the submit button, and then that's how I this lab will be submitted to um, to your canvas. Okay, so I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please like it if you liked it, if you learned anything new, and also you can write a comment because it's because of comments that the more people engage with your videos, the more likely it is that they will be suggested to somebody else. Okay, so thank you, and that's it.